All right, now let's take a look at an example of a component that uses a router outlet. So here, let's open up app.component.html. So here we have a navigation element with only one link. In a real-world application, we have multiple links here. And below that, we have this router outlet. Now here, I'm going to write two kinds of tests. One is to ensure that we have this router outlet element here. And the other is that for each link in the navigation bar, I want to make sure that that link is set up properly. Now you might ask, what is the value of writing this test? The value is that if in the future, as we are developing this application, if I come here and accidentally comment out this line as part of a debugging session, or maybe I accidentally make a typo here and then save the changes, I don't have to run the application to find this issue. So as I explained in the beginning of the last section, with automated tests, we can catch bugs before releasing our application. So as we are developing, we constantly are running these tests. And if a part of our application is not behaving as we expect, these tests are going to tell us much faster. So let's go ahead and write two tests for this component. All right, so we have a spec file here. So this component should have a router outlet. Now let's go back to the template. What we need to do in our test is to get a reference to this element and then assert that this reference is not null. How do we do that? Very simple. You have seen that before. So we start with the fixture, then go to debug element, then query. Now this time, instead of using by CSS, we can use by directive, router outlet. Now we need to import this class on the top. So import router outlet from @angular/router. Now back to our test. Let's declare a variable here. And then we expect this debug element not to be null. Save. Back to the terminal. We got an error. Router outlet is not a known element. The reason we are seeing this error here is because the router outlet directive is defined in the router module. So you have seen that in the app module, we import the router module and give it our routes. So we need to do something similar in our testing module. As part of configuring our testing module, we need to have this import section here. Now, instead of router module, we're going to use a different module called router testing module, which I have imported on top of this file. So note that this module is defined in angular/router/testing. So this is a router module specifically designed for the testing environment. It's a little bit simplified and decoupled from the browser. Now back here, we need to call with routes. And here we give it an array of our routes. We can simply pass an empty array here, and it doesn't really matter. So save, back to the terminal. Okay, all tests are passing. Now if we come back to the template and make a typo here, save, I expect our last test to fail. There you go, it failed. Beautiful. So this proves that we have a reliable test. Let's fix the typo. Now the second test. I want to ensure that we have a link that points to the to-dos page. So it should have a link to to-dos page. Now the technique I'm going to show you here, you can use it for testing any components that uses the router link directive, not just app component. So how should we write this test? Well, similar to the last test, we need to get a reference to this element. So I'm going to start with fixture dot debug element dot query by directive. And the name of this directive is router link with href. Now we need to import it on the top. So on this line, next to router outlet, I'm going to import router link with href. Now in this test, I don't want to use the query method because the to-dos link is not necessarily the first element that has this router link directive applied to it. You might have many links on this page. So I want to get all these elements as an array and then see if we have an element that points to the to-dos page in that array. So I'm going to use the query all method. Here we get debug elements. So note the plural naming. Now I'm going to get the index of the target element in this array. If it's greater than -1, that means we have this element in this array. So let index be debug elements that find index. Now here we need to pass a predicate. So DE goes to now our condition. So you have seen that this debug element has properties like attributes, classes, styles, properties, and so on. Now imagine this is our link. It should look like this, right? So you think that href is an attribute. So you would expect to find it in the attributes property, right? However, for some reason that is only known to the Angular team, this is not the case. So we need to look for this href in properties property, okay? So this properties is an object. I want to know if in this object we have a key called href, and the value of this key is /todos. Okay? And finally, the expectation. We expect index to be greater than -1. Save. All tests are passing. Beautiful. Now to verify this, let me make a typo here. Save. And we have a failing test. So this verifies that we have a reliable test. Back to template, remove the typo.